Hello, welcome to Security. This is Cesar, and this is part 2 of the AWS Wordpress Security Architecture Project. And this is the reference diagram for what we are setting up. And if you watch the first video, which I'm going to link right here, we did the initial setup of the VPC, the subnets, as well as some of the resources like the Amazon EFS file system, and along with the mount targets, as well as the Bastion host, the initial WordPress instance. And yeah, so today we're going to continue from where we left off in the last video. And yeah, let's get right into it. So now that the instances are booted up completely, I'm going to go ahead and connect to them. I'm going to be using the Putty app to connect. And I'm going to be using the Pagent app as well, because I'm going to be performing some SSH credential forwarding to connect to the private instance after connecting to the Bastion host. So I'll bring up the Pagent app and just add the key, which I've downloaded. And while the key is in the Pagent app, I can now forward it through the Putty app. So I'm going to go ahead and copy the public DNS name for the Bastion host, which I'll use to connect via Putty. I'll copy it and go back to the Putty app and paste it in. Then make sure to click on SSH and auth and allow for agent forwarding. So now I can open the session, accept, and now I'm into the Bastion host. So next, from the Bastion host, I can connect to the WordPress instance, which is in the private subnet. So I'm just going to use the SSH command. So I'll make sure to, of course, get the IP address of the WordPress app instance. Go back to my Putty session and I can SSH into it. That didn't copy well. I'll try it again. So just type in the IP address. So now I'm successfully in the WordPress instance. I can then go ahead and install WordPress. So to do that, I'll just run a Google search for this website. I'll put the link in the description. And here we have the instructions to install and configure WordPress. So I'll just copy the commands step by step and paste them in the terminal. Okay, so this command failed because I had not connected an elastic IP to the WordPress instance, and thus there was no route back from the internet to the instance. So I had to go fix that first of all. Okay, so to fix it, I have to go to the console and go back to elastic IPs, and I'll allocate an elastic IP address and associate this elastic IP address to the WordPress instance. So now that's done, there should be internet access. I just test it out by running a ping. So you can see the ping is successful. I can then go ahead and run the command, the WordPress command again to install dependencies. Give it a few minutes to be completed. Okay, so I'll just run the commands and ensure all the dependencies are installed, which will take a few minutes. And once it's done, I can continue with the installation. So I'll keep on running the commands. This one to create the parent directory for WordPress. But before I run the next command, which will download WordPress, I have to first of all mount this directory to EFS. So I'm going to mount EFS to this directory, or mount it on this directory, and make it a permanent mount as well, so it persists even after I reboot of the instance. So to do that, I open up the EFS and select attach. Then I'll just copy and paste the command because I'll be mounting via DNS. So I first tried the first method provided and did not work. So I decided to use the method I'm more familiar with, which is to install NFS util and use it with the NFS client. So I'll wait for it to finish installing and then copy the command and run it. So I enter the mount point, which is the folder I created. Okay, so this is where I discovered the issue with the EFS security group that I pointed out in the first video. I was unable to connect to EFS, and this was due to the wrong security group role that I found after troubleshooting. Okay, so to resolve it, I go back to the security group console and go to the EFS security group. And you can see I have no inbound rules. I'm going to add a rule for NFS, and I allow access from the WordPress app security group. I don't show it here, but the outbound rule should be the default rule that allows all traffic to anywhere. So let's head back to the EFS console and run the command again. So EFS is successfully mounted on the directory. And we can confirm that by running this command, which shows that the file system for the folder is EFS. So next, we're going to edit the etc/fstar file in order to make the configuration persist even after a restart. So we use sudo, of course, and we'll paste in the following configuration. I'm going to leave a link to all the configurations I'm using in the description. So we need to put in the folder that we're mounting on, as well as the EFS mount target. Again, you can get the mount targets from the EFS console. So I just copy it and paste it in, and then I can save the configuration. So to test the configuration, I'm going to run a reboot. Yeah, of course, using sudo. So I'll pause the video and give the instance a few minutes to boot up. So now the instance is booted up, I can run the command again, and I can confirm that the configuration persists even after I reboot, which means we've successfully added a permanent EFS mount on that folder. Next step is to continue the installation of WordPress. I'll run the next command to download the files. So I'll just copy the command and paste it in the terminal. Okay, so here I did some more troubleshooting, and the reason for this permission denied error was the permissions on the folder, and that's because I needed to rerun the command, the previous command, to change the ownership of the folder before running this other command. So you can see here the folder was still owned by root, so I ran this command again to change the ownership of the folder, and you can see now that the folder is owned by www data. I can now run the other command successfully. So I'll just pause the video now and give it a few minutes to download. And once it's done, the next step is to configure Apache for WordPress. Okay, so I've just cleared my terminal, and now I can proceed with the next step. I'll create the file etc apache site available wordpress.conf, and I'll paste in this configuration. So I'll save. I'll run the next command to enable this site. Run the next one to enable the rewrite module, and finally run this one to disable the default Apache site. And finally, I reload the Apache service. Okay, so the next step is to configure the database, but I'm going to be using a different method from what is specified here. So just go right into it. So the first thing I'll do is go into the RDS console and create a database. But we first of all need to create a security group for the database. So I'll return to the security group settings. Okay, so I'll create a new security group, and it's going to be the RDS security group. And this is going to give access to the RDS security group, RDS database from the WordPress instance. So I'll add an inbound rule that allows MySQL traffic from the WordPress app security group. Okay, so that should be okay, and I can create the security group. So back at the RDS console, another thing we need to do before we proceed is to create a DB subnet group, a database subnet group. So we can give it any name, and here we are going to specify the VPC and the subnets in which our database is going to reside. So I'll give it a name, give it a description, and select my WordPress VPC, and I want it to be available in availability zones 1A and 1B. For the subnets, I'm going to select the private data subnets. So I'll go back to the VPC console to confirm the ID for those. Okay, so back in the VPC console, you can see the IDs for the data subnets, and we can use it to locate the private subnet data 1 and private subnet data 2 by the ID. Just confirm one more time. Okay, so now we can create the DB subnet group. Now we're ready to create a database. I'm just going to select MySQL as a type. Select Frit here. I'll give it an instance identifier. You can leave it as default, or you can give it a name. It's up to you, basically. Also set up the default credentials. I'm going to give it a master username and password. Confirm the password. And now I'm going to select the VPC along with the subnet group that I just created. For security groups, I'm going to use the RDS WordPress security group that I created as well. And for the availability zone, to reduce any data transfer charges, I'll select the same availability zone where my WordPress instance is. That's ES1A. Of course, I'm going to leave the port as the default. And you also want to create an initial database, which is required for this method of setting it up. You can give it any name you want. I don't really need automatic backups, but ideally you should select that. And yeah, create a database. So I'll need to set up an Elastic Cache cluster, but not right now, so I'll just close this. Then I'll wait for the database to finish the setup, which will take a couple of minutes. Okay, so this next step is optional and depends on if you have a domain that you want to link the WordPress to. And I have one, so I'm going to link it to my domain by editing the .conf file. And I'm going to put in the following configuration. So I'll type in the configuration. And of course, your configuration will be different depending on your domain name. And yeah, if you don't have a domain as well, you can skip this step. It's not entirely compulsory. So I can save the configuration and reload the Apache service. And the next step will be to go to my domain management and point the URL to the WordPress instance. So I'm going to open up Route 53, which is where my domain is being managed. And I can open up the hosted zone. And I can create a record to point to the WordPress instance. Again, the URL I'm using is wordpress.security.net. So I'll go back to the EC2 console and copy the public IP address of the WordPress instance, which is the elastic IP address that I gave it. And I'll paste it in as the value for the record in Route 53. I'll also give it a small time to live because I don't want any issues when I later point it to the load balancer. So this will work no matter the domain management system you're using. So you can do the same thing. Okay, and once that is done, we should be able to now reach the WordPress instance using the URL. So I just copy it and paste it into my browser. And yeah, now we are in the WordPress instance and we can do the initial setup. So I just select English as the language. And this is where I'm going to configure the database from. So for the database name, I'm going to use the name for the initial database that I created in additional settings. Then for username and password, I'm going to use the initial username and password that I created as well. Database host, I'm going to go back to the RDS console and copy the value for the database endpoint. So I'll paste it in. I'll leave the prefix as default and submit. So if you get this message, it means you've had a successful connection to the database and now you can run the installation. So you can give a site a title or just give it Security WordPress Project. You can also give a username for the dashboard as well as a password. You can leave the default password, but since this is a test environment, I'm going to give it something easier. And make sure to note it down if you're going to use that anyways. Oh yes, and of course you want to make sure you specify an email address. So I'll confirm the use of a weak password and I can install WordPress. Okay, so the install is successful. And now I can log into the dashboard. So click on login. Now use the username and password that I just created. Okay, so with that, we have successfully installed WordPress and accessed the dashboard. And I think this is another good place to stop the video. And in the next video, we should be able to finish the rest of the configuration. Okay, so this is the reference architecture for what we're working on. And in this video, we focus majorly on the WordPress instance, which is going to be the master. We're going to use to build the master AMI that we're going to deploy to the auto-scaling group. And yeah, so in this video, we created a permanent mount to UFS. We also installed WordPress and linked it to the RDS database as well. So in the next video, we might just be able to finish the rest of the configuration, but yeah, let's see how it goes. And yeah, thanks for watching. Of course, I'm going to link the commands I used in the description and all the configuration as well. And yeah, thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.